A lot of the times Puerto Ricans give you everything all at once, and then they slowly take it away if you behave in a way that they don't approve of or aren't happy with. Whereas Brits, I think, are the opposite. I've found that you get to know people slowly and surely, and then you forge very deep relationships with them, but it's like they slowly reveal themselves to you.
Amanda Vilanova talking about coming from Puerto Rico for a drama course and her decision to stay on and build her life in the UK. This is Writer's Mosaic, What We Leave, We Carry, the series that tells the true life stories of migration to the UK.
My name is Amanda Vilanova. I was born in San Juan, Puerto Rico, 1991. I was born on the island, in a hospital, second child of Aracelis Perez. I consider myself Puerto Rican because the relationship between Puerto Rico and the United States is a very interesting one. We are called a free associated state, which means we are born US citizens and hold a US passport, but Puerto Ricans have a very different culture and speak Spanish. That is their primary language rather than English. So our cultural identity is quite strong, and we consider ourselves Puerto Rican, usually, before saying American, really. The smell of Puerto Rico is sizzling, hot plantain being taken out of a vat of lovely hot oil and put on a paper towel, waiting to be drenched in salt and eaten by a happy customer or myself. To me, the smell of Britain is the mix of petrol and kebab shops when walking down Peckham High Street. That's what I associate with Britain now, though that has changed. I think when I first arrived, I would have thought the smell of Britain was a cake baking in the oven. My image of Britain growing up was completely literary and popular culture, so very much Hugh Grant in every single film, or the Brontes describing being in love with various gentlemen who all seemed to be riding a horse and dressed in some sort of regal garb. That was my image of Britain as a child and a teenager. Britain has a romantic image, or had a romantic image in my eyes when I was growing up. It was varied and large, and for some reason had lots of rolling hills. It was very green, and all men and women spoke very well and fell in love in a gentlemanly fashion, which involved lots of letters and not a lot of touching. The first time I came to England was to participate in the Miss World pageant in 2011. Puerto Rico is well known for doing very well in beauty pageants, Miss Universe and Miss World, and it's often viewed as a way of beginning a career in arts or media. So I participated in Miss World Puerto Rico, won, and then came and participated in London. And it was a very interesting experience. I arrived in the pageant via 2 very long flights. I had at least 4 bags packed with all sorts of clothing that involved trying to look vaguely royal because it was a pageant in the United Kingdom, and also wearing coats probably for the first time in my life. And we stayed, all of the participants stayed in a hotel near the Thames. So it met all of those expectations on the first time. You saw the Thames and the London Eye and all of these incredible things that I'd been seeing via film for years. I finished the pageant and returned to Puerto Rico, finished my degree and moved to New York for a year. And I was looking and thinking of what to do next, and saw that I could train as an actor in London for a year rather than 3 years, which is the usual thing that happens in the United States. You do a 3-year MFA. I didn't have the money to do that. So I looked at programs in the UK and saw that there were auditions being held in New York. So I auditioned for a series of programs and was accepted at the Royal Central School of Speech and Drama to do 1 year MA. And the plan was to go and do 1 year of actor training and return to the US. My family was very surprised at my choice of moving to Britain to study acting. They thought it was far away, but very glamorous and wonderful. And it's interesting because the perception of the UK is that it's somehow higher and more European, perhaps, in the Puerto Rican eye than going to the US. Obviously, further away, and people are different, but probably more educated and more royal. I keep saying royal because there is an obsession in Puerto Rico with the idea of royalty. And London and the UK really embodies that for a lot of people. So my parents were very happy, but of course they didn't expect me to stay for more than a year. My mother, when I moved to do my MA, gave me a ring that my dad had given her when they were together, with an amber stone in the middle. Sort of gave it to me as, I suppose, safekeeping and emergency stock if ever one needed to, needed a bit of extra money. I still have it, thank God. And I keep it, I don't know, with lots of love and care, really. It was interesting arriving in London again in 2016 because I was living in Kilburn, which is very different from the middle of town. Kilburn High Street is a lot more similar to where I live now, really. Peckham or something like that. Kilburn or Peckham are very mixed areas with people from all sorts of heritages, often Middle Eastern, which isn't common in Puerto Rico. There's a Superdrug and a Boots and shops of everything you need on this long high street, which is also quite different from Puerto Rico because we have a lot of malls in Puerto Rico in a more American setting. And your expectation when you first moved to London, at least for me, was that everyone would be white, I suppose, blonde and light-skinned, and would speak in a certain way. But obviously, walking down Kilburn High Street, all of a sudden it was an incredibly mixed group of people. But I studied in Hampstead, and the first day I went to look at the school before it had opened for term, I walked up from the steps of Hampstead station and just saw the most beautiful children fully dressed in blue uniforms going, "Mummy," exactly like I would have expected. Very white, middle-class, well-spoken children, clearly going to private school or a very, very nice school, who sound and speak in the way that I would have expected before coming here. When I first moved, I knew absolutely no one. It was the first time I'd ever experienced not knowing anyone in a place, to be honest. I think I hadn't fully understood what loneliness was until I moved to the United Kingdom. I'd never had that feeling before where you shut the door and no one's going to greet you, actually. It was hard, I think. I'd never spent that much time on my own before. I have a very big family that spends a lot of time together in weekends and evenings, and it was the first time I'd ever sat down and ate on my own and walked around a city on my own and made my own decisions of where to go and what to do. And initially it was really wonderful and entertaining. And then by day 3, I was like, wow, this is a lot. I found it really difficult not to have someone to bounce off of. It's just you in a really big city. I phoned my mother every day and my grandmother and my dad pretty much every day, and send maybe far too many text messages. I remember my mother saying, actually, after 2 weeks when the course actually started, she said, I knew I could stop worrying because you'd stopped texting me so much. My first contact with British people was very interesting. Most of my cohort, the people that were studying the MA in acting, were Brits from different parts of the country. And for the first week, I didn't understand anyone. English, I feel that I can speak English very well. I thought I did at the time, but I had never heard the amount of accents in the same room ever before. There was a Welsh classmate, there was a Scottish classmate, there was a Northern classmate, and of someone who has become my friend, who is very Londoner from Croydon, and I couldn't understand anyone or anything. So I spent most of the first week following people, how they moved and what they did rather than what they said, because I didn't expect people to have such a varied amount of ways of shaping their mouths and saying things. I often found that people around me said things, or I understood things wrong. I thought that good morning, hello, we must get together soon meant that we were definitely going to get together soon, but people wouldn't then answer my text messages. So I found a lot of British social dynamics confusing. And I also found the pub a bit confusing as well, because people seemed to release all of their energy at the end of the week in this particular place and suddenly express quite a lot of appreciation for me or interest in me only in that space. And I found it very strange that then the next day people didn't really want to talk about it, the pub, or what had been said or done. A lot of cultures do that. A lot of cultures say things without meaning them. But if you're not within the code, if you don't know that, it can be really difficult initially to work out if people like you or not. And also, I think I ended up being very surprised by the people who actually did appreciate me and stayed in relationships, i.e. friendships or romantic relationships with me, because it wasn't who I would have expected. And I think I just didn't know the social codes that well at the time. Moving in general is very difficult when you do it on your own and you don't have any community. And so it becomes, each relationship and each connection with someone becomes really high stakes. You have a lot to lose if that person doesn't like you back and doesn't want to create a relationship with you. And I had never been in that place before. I'd had friends since I was 5 because I went to the same school my whole life. And then suddenly having no community whatsoever meant that each potential relationship meant so much to me, whereas we were 25 and people had an entire lifetime in this place. Latin Americans are very rare in the United Kingdom. London is obviously the place that has the most of them. It has quite a big Colombian community, I think, historically. And I didn't really know very many Latin Americans till the last couple of years. A lot of them live in Elephant and Castle. I worked with a theatre called Blue Elephant Theatre that's in southeast London. And because they are close to Elephant and Castle, they've done a lot of work to try and connect the Latin American community. I met a couple of Latin American artists and then also realized that there are a lot of Latin Americans working in the service industry and in cleaning. So I worked in different places where there were a lot of Latin American cleaners, and I asked, where do you go? Where do you get your food, etc. And I have ended up going to very nice Colombian restaurants, mainly in southeast London. There is a Puerto Ricans in London Facebook group with about 64 members in it. Most of them have moved back, but there is a bit of a Puerto Rican group, I suppose, but they're very spread out. The people that I know, few live in London, and many of them have moved to the UK because they've met British partners, and that's why they've decided to move to the UK. Not necessarily initially for professional reasons or to study. So they've shaped their lives around their partner rather than around the community. The university had a program that you could apply to start your own business and ask for a visa. So it was an entrepreneurial visa, and I decided after finishing my degree, I signed with an agency and I met a British partner, and I thought, well, I might as well try and stay. So I applied for their visa program, and that was successful. So me and another French Canadian started a language through drama company. So we delivered language through drama workshops for 2 years as part of that program, that visa program. It was a real good opportunity to try and stay and see if this was the right place for me. I wasn't completely sure that the UK was the right place to be. I suppose, firstly, because the Latin American community is small and the artists are hard anywhere. So if you are of an unknown origin that isn't necessarily recognized or of interest in a country, it can be very hard to even get work. So I thought, well, I'll try for a year or two, see how long it lasts. And here we still are. Now, after living 8 years in the UK, I think Brits are friendly. You just need to find out what that friendliness is. Now I understand that I used to say this, and I don't know if it's fair, it's only my impression, but that a lot of the times Puerto Ricans and sometimes Americans give you everything all at once, and then they slowly take it away if you behave in a way that they don't approve of or aren't happy with. Whereas Brits, I think, are the opposite. I've found that you get to know people slowly and surely, and then you forge very deep relationships with them, but it's like they slowly reveal themselves to you and allow you into their world rather than the other way around. Often I found that the stereotypes that people do know about Latin Americans don't often suit Latin American women. You know, Latin American women are loud and boisterous and sexy and all of these things, and mamisongas or whatever, and like reggaeton. And I find it really annoying and difficult because it's often said with a smile on one's face, and it's hard to attack people or respond to those kinds of things when they have a huge smile on their face and a condescending tone without coming across as aggressive. I have to say, my family have been really supportive of me being in the United Kingdom because of the opportunities that I've had professionally. I've been able to work and sustain myself as a freelancer in a way that would be very difficult in Puerto Rico. I think that's one of the reasons why my family have been very supportive of it. Also, it seems like a really big adventure because there aren't many Puerto Ricans on this side of the world. So it seems like you've made this giant leap across the world to try and make something of yourself in a place that not a lot of other Puerto Ricans have done that. So they have been very supportive, but it is a very long way away. And I suppose that's always difficult when you move far away and you're not in the same time zone. And during COVID, that was very difficult. I tried my best to keep connected and get my granny on Zoom and all the rest of it. But my family kind of love and hate it. I suppose they'd love me to be closer, but like the fact that I've managed to make a life in a place that doesn't have a preconceived story about Puerto Ricans, I guess. You're not going to New York or Florida or any of those places that Puerto Ricans usually go. I've kind of gone and tried to make a story of my own in a place that isn't the usual place. I think I will remain in the UK for a while. I am marrying a British gentleman, and we've decided to stay in London. I can't imagine moving from London, though, I think, because, there aren't very many Latin Americans in the UK. I can't imagine living somewhere with absolutely no Latin Americans at all. I feel a huge sense of happiness and release with commonality. I love that feeling of sitting across from someone and speaking Spanish and having watched the same telenovelas growing up and the same songs and the same music. And because I'm far away, it's all heightened in its appreciation and love for it. So I can't imagine not having anyone to do that with. It's been interesting how you try and recreate your home when you're far away. Since having more Latin American friends, I've hosted Puerto Rican nights where I make fricassé and fry plantain and make mofongo and go salsa dancing and all of these things to recreate all of that. And it's obviously never the same, but the exercise of buying an item from Puerto Rico or coffee from Puerto Rico and bringing it back and sharing it with a group of people that will love it and appreciate it and will also feel there's a reference, something that they can hook onto, that they recognize, I find really satisfying. I go back to Puerto Rico at least once a year every year for at least a month, because thankfully I'm a freelancer and I can be home for a month. It's interesting going back because after about 5 years of living in the UK, I realized that I had changed quite a lot. The way I spoke had changed. Because I originally, when I moved to the UK, I had a very strong American accent. And I'm not saying I have a British accent now, but my voice has definitely morphed to adapt to the sound of, UK voices, if that makes sense. It's been subconscious. I don't feel I've become British, but I'm definitely a very different version of my Puerto Rican self. I guess it's interesting because Puerto Rico's first language and culture is Spanish. I feel that I've been able to hold on to that because it isn't the same language. So when speaking in Spanish and when in Puerto Rico and when dancing and singing those songs, I feel that I am Puerto Rican. But the relationship with whatever side of myself speaks English has changed a lot. Because I used to consume a lot of American culture, the programs that I watched and the films that I watched and all of that were very, very American. And now for the last 8 years, I've been dominated by the UK. And I think in that sense, I have become more British. I don't know if I will ever feel British. And I don't know if that's because of language, mainly. But I don't think I could ever say to someone, I'm British. Not in a rejected way or in an ugly way, but I don't know if it will be possible. And it'd be interesting if you make your life in the UK and have children in the UK. I often ask myself, what will it feel like to form a British family? I have no expectations and I have no idea what that would look like. I think when you form the idea that you're not going to return somewhere, that the center of your life isn't going to be in that place, you have to invest quite a lot of energy in creating a new one somewhere else and an idea of that place and a relationship with that place. So you come back to the first and there's so much time and space to reflect on what you like and what you don't like, what you wish you had more of and what you doesn't necessarily serve you. It does mean it's very confusing because you don't necessarily feel you belong anywhere. But then again, is that important? Do we have to belong completely to a place? And I sort of hopefully will make my peace with that I don't necessarily belong solely and completely. I've had to form my own little patch of land, so to speak, in which I belong and I act accordingly, I guess. I, in my first year at drama school, was called loud and imitated, and my arm movements were imitated and my way of speaking was imitated. And I now don't think that it was probably out of nastiness, but when those things occur, you suddenly become super conscious of your difference. And I remember not being conscious of my difference initially when I moved to the UK. I hadn't met very many people from the UK, so I had no reason to think that anyone would look at me and think that I was particular or different. Probably a bit naive on my part. When I'd worked so hard and my family had worked so hard for me to speak such good English, which is it's a big deal, you know. A lot of time and money was invested in making sure that both me and my brother, spoke very good English. Moving to the UK, firstly having an American accent and people finding it very confusing. Oh, are you from California? Are you from here or there? And you're, no, I'm from Puerto Rico. Then being both American and Latino, I was suddenly told that I was loud and a bit over the top and etc. And I found myself shrinking a little bit, I think, slowly. And it took maybe 5 or 6 years of meeting other Latinos to make an active decision not to shrink. But I know you must adapt to the spaces that you live in. And some shrinking must occur, I guess. But that doesn't mean it doesn't come at a cost, I suppose. And that when you're naive about those things, they hurt more when you realize them and think about them in retrospect. Because you weren't prepared. I don't think I wasn't really prepared for any of it. I didn't think about it when I moved. I wasn't ready for any sort of prejudice or impressions being made because of the place I was from. And there's nothing wrong with being loud or open or big with one's expressions, but you are made to feel it is, even if it's not purposeful. I grew up listening to a lot of American music, and only now have discovered a lot of British bands that I didn't know about. My partner is a violinist, has always been interested in folk music, and is a member of a band called Shovel Dance Collective. And they are a very interesting group of people of varied heritages and genders, and they source music, folk music, from across the ages in the UK, from very different places, and often try and identify proto-feminist stories and things like that within the folk music of the UK. And I would have never thought, as someone who grew up listening to salsa, merengue, and reggaeton, that I would like folk music at all. Obviously, it helps that it's my partner, but too, I think that particular group is interested in uncovered stories from the UK and things that connect us across time, actually. And I have found that listening to them, there's a lot more in common than we think. Generally not in the human experience, but across cultures and across genders. So I actually now really, really love English folk music and its drums, and find a lot more commonality actually in Puerto Rican folk music than I would have thought possible. I think there is, regardless of the intensity of drumming or lack of drumming, there is a need to move. And a lot of the folk music in the UK actually has like a drum beat and something to be moved to. And if you come from a Caribbean or a Latin American culture, that is huge, and that is kind of part of everything that our music makes. Also, a club scene in London. Obviously, lots of clubbing in Puerto Rico, but there's a lot of partner dancing. So salsa, merengue, bachata. It's about dancing with the other. And I suppose clubbing, which for me in the UK is quite different. The rules aren't there of how you touch others and how you share in that with others. So I've had to kind of develop my own version of it, and it just ends up being, you know, sort of like reggaeton, or really deep and down in the hips in a way that maybe Brits don't. And that's always really interesting to observe, actually, what bits of the body move more. And I've often found that Brits clubbing seem to be moving the top half of their bodies, and a lot of Latinos are moving the bottom half. And when you're moving both, it's like quite a sight. So I wouldn't say it's changed, but it's kind of added layers, and it has made me think about the way one moves more. going to salsa in London is very interesting, actually, because people take it very seriously. I've been to various salsa nights in London, and often there's lots of Brits who have made it a project to learn to dance salsa, and they go and they have the appropriate footwear and they've practiced the moves and they go and exercise that muscle with a lot of like care. The difference is that in Puerto Rico, it can be quite a casual activity. Not that people don't take salsa lessons, people definitely do, and there are spaces where people show off, but a lot of people learn it at home with their family. So you go and dance salsa and it's a very kind of relaxed environment. Whereas I found that in London, people are ready to show, they've been working hard on their moves and they're ready to show off. But it's super satisfying seeing music that would have been made in your country, your part of the world, and groups of people, not just British, but from all over, absolutely loving it and being so committed to performing it. I find it really exciting. I think I have made a good choice in coming to Britain. I've had a lot of professional opportunities, a lot of wonderful professional opportunities, and I've met a really good partner, and that's very important to me. I think London is a place where you can find a lot of art and a lot of culture, and that fills me with joy and with excitement. So it's a really, really exciting place to be. And I do now feel that I have a community and that hopefully I've been accepted by groups of people within the UK. So I do think I have made a good choice. There is a cost to leaving the place you are from. Home is a very important concept to all of us, I think. And I suppose that is always something every time I go back to Puerto Rico and I realize that I am different and I maybe am no longer from there. It does create a large amount of anxiety. And when you run into difficulty in the place that you've chosen to be, when you aren't well received by a group of people, when your work isn't valued, particularly when no one has taken an interest, it can be incredibly anxiety inducing and almost crumbling, because if no one is even interested in this aspect of me, what am I guess? Where and what am I, and where does my value reside? Home is important, and I think if you're going to be healthy as a migrant, you have to ask yourself, how do I make home in this place I've decided to go to? I do think about having children, what and how they'll feel and behave in this culture. Because all of my reference points for growing up, for rules, for ages in which you do things and etc. are completely Puerto Rican. And I have realized that they are completely different in the UK. The education system, the time people drink, the time people have sex, all sorts of things are completely, completely different. And I think I would have to make a huge effort, one, for my children to speak Spanish, for my children to listen to salsa music and merengue music and reggaeton music, and to have a real contact with that and with the food and with the culture as best I can. Because if not, I would feel that they'd miss out on a whole richness that could be a part of them.